College football never stops. When college football news breaks, it breaks on On3. From the transfer portal to the playoff race to coaching changes, the sport is moving every single day. That's why college football fans turn to On3, a trusted authority with real reporters and real communities built around the teams you care about. Find all of your favorite teams and join the community. Get the full picture at on3.com. That's ON and the number 3.com.
Happy holidays. Want to give your host a gift? Consider subscribing, rating, and reviewing the show this holiday season. It really helps the show grow. From all of us at Believe, have a Merry Christmas, everyone, and a happy holiday.
He's a retired ATF agent. From 2006 to 2014, he worked undercover in storefront stings, infiltrating organized crime. He and his team took thousands of guns off the street from violent felons. And he's coming up on the Law Enforcement Today show. Welcome to the Law Enforcement Today radio show. I'm your host. My name's John J. Wiley. In addition to being a radio broadcaster, I'm a retired police sergeant. For the latest news articles and much more, check out our website, letradioshow.com. In the Law Enforcement Today show, we'll be joined by special guests. We'll be talking about their experiences and issues affecting law enforcement officers, first responders, their families, their community, and victims of horrendous crimes. Be sure to like us on Facebook. Our page is Law Enforcement Today Radio Show. Check out the daily articles on our website, letradioshow.com. And while you're there, download our free app. Of all the radio stations in the United States, there are no other shows like the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. And on Facebook, there's only one official page. Do a search on Facebook for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. And be sure to like the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show Facebook page. Calling us from the Southeast Georgia area, we have Lou Valoze on the phone. Lou is a retired ATF agent. He worked many, many years undercover. We're going to talk about that in a moment. He's also author of the book, Storefront Sting, an ATF Agent's Life Undercover. Written by Lou, with Brian Whitney, and forward by Javier Pena, who we've had on the show before. Some heavy hitters in that book, Lou.
Yes, thank you. It's an honor to be here, John. Much appreciated.
I'm so glad you were here. I'm so glad you were here to tell your story. And, you know, to be honest with you, the ATF doesn't get a whole lot of publicity. And as a matter of fact, most law enforcement agencies don't. And when they do, it's usually wrong, misleading, inaccurate, or flat out biased. So I'm so thrilled you're coming on to tell your story.
Yep. Thank you. We, ATF, seems like the only publicity we do get is negative. Sometimes it has been deserved at times, mostly due to ATF management. But all the great things that we've done don't seem to ever make it to the press.
No, and it's usually the management, administration, brass. That's usually the cause of it. And a lot of people really don't understand what ATF does. What is the mission, briefly, of the ATF?
So our mission, which has changed over the years, is primarily, and probably for the last 20 years, gangs, guns, and drugs. And that's primarily getting the crime guns out of the hands of gang members, violent felons, and the people out there in society who are not supposed to have guns. That is our primary mission.
One of the things I always say, and I'm a retired street cop, is the ATF has a reputation amongst law enforcement, at least in Baltimore, of being street cops. You saw them. They were out there. They're on the street. They're working. Where some of the other federal agencies, and I'm not saying this is a negative, but some of the federal agencies rarely ever leave the office.
Yeah, I came over from another agency. I was out on the streets in Los Angeles and was lucky enough to get on a task force with ATF, and I saw what you just described. These guys were first well respected, by the LAPD, by the real street cops, and they were always in the middle of things. I mean, they were going after the worst of the worst. They were kind of the cowboys, the street cops of federal law enforcement. And, I said to myself then, this is what I'm going to do. They were doing all the heavy undercover work. That's what I wanted to do. And eventually I was able to make my way over to the ATF.
So you did a lot of undercover work, and we'll talk about that at length in a moment. But before we do, Lou, I got to tell people, I worked narcotics for years, and I was a good surveillance cop. I was a great narcotics surveillance cop. I was lousy at undercover. Never did quite get the hang of it. Just not good at it. It's not my bailiwick. How did you get trained for this? Because that's not a natural thing to do.
Yeah, I discovered it. It was the one thing in my life I was good at. When I first got on with ATF, I had put in for, as a Spanish-speaking agent, transferring over to ATF, I put in for New York, Miami, and Los Angeles, thinking, I would definitely get one of the three. And the ATF put me in Savannah, Georgia. And, I didn't even know anything about Savannah, but I was very lucky in that my first partner, was a big-time undercover guy. His name was Randy Beach. And within my first few days, because back then with ATF, before you even went to the academy, they gave you your gun and badge, and you were out in the street. And within my first few days, I was doing undercover gun buys in fast food restaurants and alleyways. And once I started getting into it, I knew I had found a home, and I wanted to work my way on to kind of that national scene in the undercover world, in the ATF Enhanced Undercover Program, and I did. I became obsessed with it.
So backtracking, back in the day, when you guys started, you were put on the streets before you even went to the academy.
Yeah, you got your badge right away, and your gun, and we were out there working. I was already, making cases and had court dates before I even went to the ATF Academy.
That's amazing, because back in my day, and I consider myself a geezer by comparison to a lot of other people. I started in police work in 1980, and we were given a badge, and we were in the academy. We didn't get issued a gun until much later down the road, and it was definitely a unique learning experience. There was so much to absorb and take in. I thought the academy was hard, but the truth is, everything I thought I was good at when I graduated from the academy, I was not prepared for the streets. It was a totally different ball of wax. Yeah,
I really can relate to that. When I first got on the job and got sent out to Los Angeles, for my first 6 months, they put you at the LA County Jail Central. And, my job was to sit there and to interview criminal aliens, foreign-born nationals, on the release line to determine alienage and deportability. And that's when I really first got my introduction to those West Coast gangs, to the MS-13, to the 18th Street gang. And it's probably where I learned the most, like you're saying. I didn't know anything about these West Coast gangs, and I wasn't prepared for that level of violence and the inhumanity that they possessed coming from these other countries. And it was an eye-opener, and I cherished those first 6 months, even though no one was crazy about sitting in the jail. It was a real eye-opener, and it prepared me for the streets.
Yeah, I don't think I could do jail work. And by the way, our brothers and sisters who work corrections, if they weren't born a special breed, they develop skill sets to be a special breed, because that takes a special person to be inside. Just the noise alone would drive me out of my mind.
Unsung heroes. They don't get any glory or recognition, but they truly are the unsung heroes. Every single person they deal with, has obviously the potential for violence, and they really are the unsung heroes of law enforcement. What a job. You really have to be up for it every day. You can't even take an hour off on that job.
No, there's no break at all. But before we go to a break, I want to backtrack. You said something very important, a similar case of me. My background did not prepare me for what I experienced in law enforcement. What was your background?
I grew up in the suburbs in New York, and I'd gone to college, went to college on a football scholarship, and got out, and I had no direction at all. I had a worthless economics degree and a terrible grade point average, and I was working at a bank for about $9 an hour when I just had a chance meeting in the Bronx with a guy who I played ball with. Asked me to come down and visit, and he was at his brother's house, and his brother just happened to be a DEA agent, and he had just gotten back from Panama, and he was working undercover. He talked to me for about a half hour. We had a beer, and I knew right then that's what I wanted to do.
And the rest, they say, is history. We're going to take a short break. We're talking with Lou Valoze on the Law Enforcement Show, retired ATF agent, also author of the book. It is called Storefront Sting, an ATF agent's life undercover. This is Law Enforcement Show. We're going to take a short break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. One of your top destinations on the internet should be letradioshow.com. That's our website. You'll find every episode of the show as a free podcast. They're all converted to a podcast after airing on radio. You'll also find great blog articles, op-ed articles, and much more, all at letradioshow.com. That's letradioshow.com. Don't forget, it's all free at letradioshow.com.
College football never stops. When college football news breaks, it breaks on On3. From the transfer portal to the playoff race to coaching changes, the sport is moving every single day. That's why college football fans turn to On3, a trusted authority with real reporters and real communities built around the teams you care about. Find all of your favorite teams and join the community. Get the full picture at on3.com. That's ON and the number 3.com.
Return conversation with Lou Valoze on the Law Enforcement Show. Lou is retired ATF agent. By the way, thank you for your service. Forgot to mention that. He is also author of the book Storefront Sting, an ATF agent's life undercover. Before we went to break, Lou, we started talking about your background, your career, and you started with another federal agency, then gravitated towards ATF. And by the way, the ATF in Baltimore had great reputation, and they had some crazy parties. I think the one I remember the most, or can't remember, is the Elliot Ness night parties. They were phenomenal.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. And those were different days, different times. I think a lot of what we did when we were younger, you don't do anymore.
Absolutely. Actually, those parties were actually outlawed and banned later on by ATF. So that should tell you a little something about how great they were.
I'm going to put it this way. I had a wild streak back in the day, and I was tame. I was mild compared to a lot of these other people.
Yeah, when I first got introduced kind of on the national scene to, who eventually became all my undercover brothers and sisters, man, it was eye-opening. I mean, these guys were crazy. And, what always struck me about these guys as I slowly got to know them and became a part of it was how smart they were. I mean, you would be in a bar with these guys, and it would look like, or some gang was in the bar, but these were college-educated street cops who were borderline genius at what they did.
Yeah, and also heroic. It takes a lot of nerve to walk into the lion's den. It takes a lot of being able to think on your feet and think outside of the box to be undercover. That's why I really wasn't that good at it.
Well, I always compare undercover work and great undercovers to comedians. I think there's a lot of similarities there. All the great comedians, if you think about it, incredible on their feet, their ability to ad lib, and all of them kind of have a little bit of a tragic life in their personal life. There's kind of almost a sadness, behind the scenes. And, that was most of the guys I worked with. And unfortunately, I kind of fell into it myself, but, there was a lot of tragedy and loss in the personal lives, kind of behind the scenes of the great work that was done.
And not to belittle that point, so many people I've worked with in law enforcement, all the different federal agencies, and when I was detailed at DEA, there were no exception. There were Maryland State Police there were Anne Arundel County, there were Baltimore County Police, Baltimore City Police, like myself, DEA agents, and I'd say half of them had tremendous issues going on at home. And one of the ways they dealt with it, Lou, was to throw themselves into their work.
And that's absolutely what I did. I became consumed with it. Again, I had found what I was good at, and it became a healthy competition between us. There were guys like myself, Jay Dobbins, Chris Bayless, Richie Zayas, and we started making these huge cases. And you'd hear about a case that another guy did, and how many defendants, how many guns off the street. And although you were proud that was a member of your team that did it, deep down inside you were like, well, I can outdo that. I can one up that. And it became sort of a healthy competition work-wise, and ATF certainly loved the results, but it was not very healthy for any of our personal lives, for sure.
Well, one of the things, and I do know a little bit of Jay's story, and I want to have him on the show in the future. He paid a terrific price. I know you did too. One of the sayings that it took me a long time to get, Lou, was that you can love this job, but it won't love you back.
Boy, that's the truth, John. Yeah, you think you're important, and you think that your office can't do without you. You find out real quick that you truly are just another number, and when you go, you will be replaced. Either by someone who can do it as good or better than you, or even not as good, and the agency or the department just moves on, and that's the truth.
Yeah, and sometimes I don't know if this ever crosses your mind. I sometimes wonder if any of those cats back there even know who I was.
Yeah, at a point you just become old. What's his name?
The old geezer. Back to the conversation. Yeah. I'm an old geezer. I survived.
Absolutely, which is why you kind of look back and, for those of us that kind of put the job in front of their family and friends, it does lead to some regrets.
Yeah.
Like I've said this before, I definitely was never up for the Father of the Year or the Husband of the Year award while I was, in my career, and that's something that I'm certainly not very proud of.
Well, I get it, and I paid a terrific price too. My family did as well. And before we get into your story, I'll just say this: I'm a much better husband and father than I was then, and I wasn't a bad guy. I wasn't a bad husband or father. I just didn't have the tools that they have nowadays, that I have nowadays.
I would totally agree with that, John. It's I was just kind of absent, and now that once you have a little perspective and you can sit back and look at, I know I've become both a better husband and father, but it almost took that bottoming out, for me to realize what I was doing wrong.
Did that happen after you retired or towards the end of your career?
That happened at the end of my career, at the tail end.
Were you one of these guys? And I say guys, that means men and women, who are like, everything's gone and my identity's gone and everything's important's gone and all I have to do is think and then become acutely aware of my shortcomings.
Yeah, I was identifying myself as an undercover agent. That's who I was. I was an undercover agent. It's what I did it well, and it became my identity. I was believing in my own game, my own hustle. At the expense of my family and my friends. And, it took a total crash for me to kind of remember who I really am and to rearrange my priorities.
Well, I'm glad you did. I'm glad you made it through that hump. And I'm glad if you're like me and many of the guests I've had on the show, we're still a work in progress. None of us has arrived. None of us is where we wanted to be, but we're further away from the guy we used to be. And I'll go back to what I said before. The guy before was not a bad guy. I don't want people to misconstrue what I'm saying. It's just not the guy I wanted to be.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
We talked about going undercover. One of the things that, and I always say this, I could be 85 years old. I could be the guy in the old folks' home pushing a walker and people say, shh, there's 5-0. I'll always look like a cop no matter what I do. And I would try to do undercover drug buys and they'd dress me up and I'd have a pierced ear, which no one did back in the time. And I had all kinds of rules I try to do. And I was never able to get anyone to ever sell me anything because I always look like a cop. And I just couldn't find a way to break beyond that.
Yeah, I understand that. I can always pick a cop out, and I think most people can. They're just by the way, not even the way you look, but the way you carry yourself.
I got the mean mug going on. My daughters will tell you jokes about that. This is the Law Enforcement Show. We're going to take a short break. We're talking with Lou Valoze, and he is a retired ATF agent, also author of the book Storefront Sting, an ATF agent's life undercover. This is the Law Enforcement Show. We're going to take a short break. When we return, we're going to talk about his undercover work and much more. One of the questions I get all the time is how can I show my support for law enforcement? We're all busy. We've got busy lives, but there's something oh so simple you can do with our Facebook page. Search for Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show Facebook page. And when you see a post you agree with that resonates with you, share it, especially episodes of the podcast. To do all that, just search for us on Facebook, look for Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, and be sure to click like.
College football never stops. When college football news breaks, it breaks on On3. From the transfer portal to the playoff race to coaching changes, the sport is moving every single day. That's why college football fans turn to On3, a trusted authority with real reporters and real communities built around the teams you care about. Find all of your favorite teams and join the community. Get the full picture at on3.com. That's ON and the number 3.com.
Return our conversation with Lou Valoze on the Law Enforcement Show. Lou is retired ATF agent. That's alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, I believe, if I'm correct. He's also author of the book, Storefront, Sting, and ATF Agent's Life Undercover, written by Lou with Brian Whitney and forward by Javier Pena from Narcos fame. Before I go further, I got to thank you again for your service. I always forget to do that. And the truth is, Lou, I've been thanked far more after I retired than I ever did on the job. Has that been the case for you?
Absolutely. I kind of lived an invisible life while I was on the job. So, even neighbors, people just didn't know what I did, but there wasn't a whole lot of thanks going out while we were serving. But just like you, especially since writing the book, I've kind of received more than I deserve, I feel.
I hear you, and I never quite know how to respond to that. So I've gotten better. I understand the polite thing to say, you're welcome, because I don't know what to say. Yep. So you gravitated in your career towards undercover work, and I get, you said earlier about the healthy competition. You wanted to outdo this other agent who made a great case and everything else. I get that part. I want to do better. Quite honestly, I wanted to be Superman. I wanted to be the one everybody looked up to. Is like, man, there's a cop over there. If you have a problem, that's the one you got to go see. I wanted to be that guy all the time. And I put unnatural pressure on me. When you had that healthy competition, did you find out in the end that you were putting unhealthy pressure on yourself?
Oh, absolutely. I never said no. Anyone who needed any undercover work done, I didn't say no. I wouldn't turn it down. I wanted to be the guy, the go-to guy, as you're saying. And that's kind of how I fell into the storefront operations. I had an agent just call me and say, hey, we're going to start up a storefront operation. We need an undercover. Do you want to do it? I didn't even know what a storefront operation was, and I said yes. You
were all in, and you had no idea what it's about.
No, I'd heard of the storefront. The old LAPD, NYPD had done some, mostly just to disrupt small-time fencing operations and all that, but we were taking it to a whole nother level.
I think there's an episode or two of Hill Street Blues where they did some of that fencing stuff, the storefront things. So
yes,
one of the things I don't think people really fully grasp, it's one thing to do undercover work with drug enforcement, where it's organized crime. With ATF, and you're buying guns, you're selling guns, or trying to get guns off the street, whatever it might be. And when I say you're selling guns, I'll explain in a moment how that works. You're dealing with armed people, and you're dealing with violent felons and criminals who are armed. You know right away you're going into bad situations.
Yeah, one thing you know right away is there's going to be guns at the deal, right? Whether, they're being carried or they're part of the deal, there's going to be guns present. So, that should definitely raise your awareness, and if it doesn't, you shouldn't be doing the job. But our mandate was to deal with the armed violent offenders, with the trigger pullers, the ones putting the guns on the street. So it kind of upped the game, in all of our undercover transactions and our deals, because these were the most violent people on the streets that we were going after.
And that takes a lot of nerve. It takes a lot of confidence in your skill sets that I can survive this.
Yeah, it's, the key to, and I have so many people ask me, weren't you scared? Were you scared? And my answer is no, and that's not a tough guy answer. I was doing what I loved. I was excited. This was exactly what I found. How many people find exactly what they want to do in life and then can succeed at it? I did that. So I never had nerves. I wasn't really scared. I was doing what I love to do. Looking back now, did I put myself in some situations that probably weren't very smart? Absolutely. But at the time I was doing it, it was about that high.
And you did these undercover storefronts for, was it about 8 years?
Yes. Yep. They had a good run. They ran from about 2007 to about 2014.
And during that time period, roughly, how many guns did you take off the street from violent criminals? I'm not talking about the mom and pop Second Amendment law-abiding citizens like you and me. I'm not talking about those folks at all. I'm talking about the bad people.
Yeah, we only bought crime guns. So during that time, I did 4 operations myself, that I was the lead undercover case agent. Those 4 operations, which were all in Georgia, I bought over 1,000 guns in those 4 operations. And during that time, I flew all over the country. ATF had designated me the subject matter expert in undercover storefront investigations. And I went all over the country, West Coast, East Coast, up north, Southeast, and helped other agents start these operations or help them during the operation. And again, thousands of more guns were purchased off the street during that time.
And without giving away operational secrets, I don't want to do that. You have to have some fail-safe measures when you have these undercover operations going on. I'm sure there was backup teams, there's other things, but really you're on your own, aren't you?
Yeah, we say this all the time, especially in, some of the areas we were in and with some of the, physical barriers that were up. Really, your cover team was there basically to avenge your death if something happened. There's no way the guys coming in had bad intentions and they got the drop on you. There's no way your cover team's saving you. They're basically there to avenge your death because by the time something happens, there's no way they're in the door yet.
No. And when you did the undercover stuff, you had no soft body armor. You had no badge. You had none of that stuff, did you?
Never.
Anything that could identify you. People need to understand this is something that Hollywood gets wrong 99% of the time. Anytime you go undercover, and I said this, I'm lousy at it. When they go undercover, there's nothing that identifies you as being a cop. As quite often with long-term undercover, you have fake identities, fake driver's licenses as well, correct?
Yeah, in a long-term infiltration, which I did more than I should have probably, but you are a different person. You have mine was Sal Nunziato. So I had Sal Nunziato. He had a driver's license in about 3 states, Social Security card, credit history, everything, magazine subscriptions, everything. If you Googled him, if you had a private investigator, if you hired a private investigator to look up Sal Nunziato, he was a real person. And yes, there were times when not only during a long-term infiltration did you obviously not carry a badge, but you didn't even carry a gun, depending on who you were working with. There were times where having a gun on you wasn't even an option. So you're right about that. Hollywood gets it wrong all the time.
During these undercover operations, did you have any moments where you're like, oh, no, this is going to end bad?
I had a lot. There were times I can think of some in Chicago when it was a mafia infiltration that was also combined with the motorcycle gang. Times when I was in the bad guy's place, and he had frequency interceptors. I couldn't even wear a wire, and there was about 3 or 4 levels of security to get through to get into this place. And basically, when I was in there, and I was in there with a whole bunch of mobsters, I had no backup. No one could hear me. There was literally no backup. And, there were tense negotiations in a time when I thought to myself, if these guys, they either decide that they've dealt with me enough and they know I'm showing up with $20,000 to buy a kilo, they're just going to take it and kill me. There is nobody coming to save me. You're
totally on your own. That's a feeling I don't know, and I'll be honest with you, I don't relish. This is Law Enforcement Show. We are talking with Lou Valoze, retired ATF agent, also author of the book Storefront Sting, an ATF agent's life undercover. We're going to take a short break. When we return, we're going to talk about the undercover work in the Storefront Stings and how undercover work began to affect his personality and personal life. This is Law Enforcement Show. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. If you want to be a guest on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, simply contact us. It couldn't be easier. You can send us a message on Facebook. Look for and like the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show page, or email jay@letradio.com. That's JAY@letradio.com.
College football never stops. When college football news breaks, it breaks on On3. From the transfer portal to the playoff race to coaching changes, the sport is moving every single day. That's why college football fans turn to On3, a trusted authority with real reporters and real communities built around the teams you care about. Find all of your favorite teams and join the community. Get the full picture at on3.com. That's ON and the number 3.com.
Return conversation with Lou Valoze on the Law Enforcement Show. Lou is a retired ATF agent. He is also author of the book, Storefront Sting, An ATF Agent's Life Undercover. This is fascinating stuff we're talking about, Lou, and I appreciate your service and spending part of your day talking about this, because this stuff really is not easy to talk about. People may think it's the braggadocious, I did this, I did that. You haven't talked about that. You've talked more about the human element of what it's like doing this, and that's part, it's not easy.
Yeah, it's, and that's a pretty common theme with most of the guys I worked with. We're more likely to tell you about the mistakes we made than the successes that we had, because there's no playbook really for undercover work, and it's very gray. It's a gray area. It's not black and white, and we learned through our mistakes, and there was a lot of mistakes made.
Well, they always say, the old saying is hindsight's 20/20, in police work especially. So many things, I'm sure, over your career, new policies, new training procedures, that results of horrific things that happened in the past with other agents, other officers.
Yeah, and that is kind of amplified with undercover work. And, I'm going to borrow a line from my colleague from Jay Dobbins because it rings so true. Because it's such a gray area working undercover, and literally, and I'm not being dramatic, your life is on the line almost every time you're in an undercover deal. What happened during a lot of our long-term infiltrations is we took the laws very seriously, all right? We never broke a law. You can't break the law. Unfortunately, we kind of considered ATF policies to be more suggestions because I would be not happy, but I'm willing to answer to some supervisor who's never done any undercover work, than I would be to get shot by a bad guy. So
we had an old saying, I'd rather be tried by 12 than carried by 6.
Yes, sir.
That's the reality of the situation. And those rules, we play within the rules, and there's a lot of latitude you're given. But there's certain things you just don't do, and none of us stood for it. I can't speak for you, but none of us would tolerate those things, that corruption, other things just didn't happen because it was not something. The Serpico days ended a long time ago is what I'm getting at.
That's right.
What I do want to focus on is, and many of my guests say this, when you work in law enforcement for any length of time, you're going to get dinged up. I'm not just talking about physically. I've had more surgeries you can shake a stick at, more orthopedic surgeries. But there's certainly emotional damage. There's mental damage, for lack of better words. There's scars that people don't see. When you work undercover, it's got to be magnified 100-fold.
Without a doubt, especially if you don't take a break, which I never did. And there's kind of two thoughts on that. One thought is, well, it's most healthy for a law enforcement officer who wants to work undercover. Let him do it for 4 or 5 years and get him out. Get him out, get him back to reality, let him do something else. But that wasn't the way with us. Because the other school of thought on that is that after 4 or 5 years, man, you just you're really honing your skills. I mean, now you're really ready, to do it. You've learned from your mistakes. You've learned from your experiences. And we never stopped. I couldn't stop. Even if they had told me to stop, I wouldn't have stopped. And you don't realize what that is doing to you, the effect it's having on you mentally, until you crash and burn. That's what it took for me. You don't realize how you're slowly slipping into that undercover persona, and it's kind of taken over a little bit from your real persona, and you're going to find out the hard way.
Did you ever feel like, who am I? I'm not the guy I used to be. I don't know who I am.
I did, and my wife would check me at times and say, "Listen, I married a cop, a college-educated guy. I didn't marry some gangster, so stop acting like a gangster." But very hard to turn that switch on and off. Very hard to be gone for a few months and get a small break and come back home and act like the person you're supposed to be and you were, and then slip right back into role when you're done and go right back in. So the lines get blurry.
I'll be totally honest with you, Lou. I have a deep appreciation for people that do long-term undercover, whether it be deep cover, because there's different phases of undercover work. There's occasional like drug buy, those sorts of things. And when I said earlier in the conversation about selling guns, one of the biggest ploys we had was an officer was posing as a drug dealer, and he would sell his service revolver or service weapon to a guy like me. And the so-called other drug dealers think, oh, well, if he's selling guns, he must be okay, so I can sell him pot or coke or meth or whatever it might be. That's what we did. It was something we did often. So I just want to clarify that, because I'm sure people are thinking Miami Vice and all this other stuff. And to me, that may occur somewhere, but that's not the reality.
Yeah, the reality of undercover work is so different from, what you see on TV and what you thought it was. I went into it thinking, and you said Miami Vice, and, we all watched it. And so I went into it thinking, it was going to be yachts and supermodels and mansions. And, in reality, it was projects and trailer parks and crap.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I'm still waiting for the $1 million loft apartments. Where are those deals?
Right. Yeah. It's just, that's just not reality. And once you get immersed in that world, and it is a dirty world. It really is. Then your survival skills take over. You have to act a certain way. You have to do certain things to survive and thrive in that world. You have to, the greatest undercover skill of all is to make other people, and I mean bad guys when I say other people, want to be a part of your hustle. And that's what I did. I showed them what my hustle was. I was a gun trafficker. I would buy guns off the street, crime guns. I would bring them up to my mobster buddies up in New York and sell them at a huge profit. And that's what really happens in the world. That's gun trafficking. And you have to have the ability to make people see that and want to be a part of your hustle. And that'll open up the whole world to the criminal element once you can do that.
Did these skills that you acquired doing that help you transition into civilian life and then eventually writing your book?
I don't know about civilian life. I found out real quick there's not a whole lot of appeal to the private sector for a retired undercover agent. Those skills don't transfer over to the private sector very well. But when it came to writing the book, yes. I found out real quick that I'm not a writer. We write police reports and investigative reports. And when I first wrote my book, that's how it read. And nobody, other than me and you, nobody wants to read that.
Right.
I went through 5 co-authors. I kissed 5 frogs till I found the prince. His name was Brian Whitney, and he was able to take my story and make it very readable, make it a page-turner, a quick read, and exciting.
And the name of the book is?
Storefront Sting, an ATF agent's life undercover.
Just the title alone right there, Lou, is like, it grabs, it kind of smacks you in the mouth. It's like, I got to check this out.
Yeah, no one's ever written about these operations. These operations, they cease to exist anymore. They're pretty much Congress shut them down. And we had such an incredible run. And so we took so many guns off the street. Yes, we did a lot of drugs, took a lot of drugs off the street, but that is, as you know, that's just kind of sticking your finger in a hole in the dam. The guns, I always looked at it this way. Every one gun I bought off the street in an undercover deal from some convicted felon or from some gangbanger, how many lives potentially have you saved? How many lives could that one gun have taken? So
Absolutely.
To take that many guns off the street was a real big deal to me.
And where can people get more information about your book and maybe contact you?
So the best way is just to Google Storefront Sting, and it'll come right up. It's on Amazon. I'm proud to say it was It has been Amazon's #1 bestseller, all right, in the law enforcement genre under new releases. It's kind of bouncing back and forth with another guy a cop who was involved in the Breonna Taylor situation. So if you Google Storefront Sting, the Amazon link will come up. It's available at Target, Walmart, a couple other places. I have a website, louvaloze.com, LOUVALOZE.com, and I'm available for public speaking. I have a presentation. I'm going out to Vegas next month to do it with the Narcos guys. And I'm looking forward to getting on the road and starting to promote this.
Please do me a favor when you're in Vegas. Tell them I said hello. And by the way, thanks so much for being a guest on the show. Very much appreciated.
Thank you, sir. It's been an honor.
I'd like to thank our guests for coming on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. The Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show is a nationally syndicated weekly radio show broadcast on numerous AM and FM radio stations across the country. We're always adding more affiliate stations. If you enjoyed the podcast version of the show, which is always free, please do me a favor and tell a friend or two or three. I'll be back in just a few days with another episode of the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and Podcast. Until then, this is John J. Wiley. See ya.
College football never stops. When college football news breaks, it breaks on On3. From the transfer portal to the playoff race to coaching changes, the sport is moving every single day. That's why college football fans turn to On3. A trusted authority with real reporters and real communities built around the teams you care about. Find all of your favorite teams and join the community. Get the full picture at on3.com. That's ON and the number 3.com.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening. Happy holidays! Want to give your host a gift? Consider subscribing, rating, and reviewing the show this holiday season. It really helps the show grow. From all of us at Believe, have a Merry Christmas, everyone, and a Happy Holiday.